I love a name. It's important to me. When Jay and I started our podcast, I would go on these I used to run and jog, and I would go over all these ideas of what I wanted to name the podcast. And when this new project was being birthed, I was like, all I need for it to have is a name. So I was in the gym. I had taken a break between sets and just threw on TikTok. I'm heavily addicted to TikTok. It was a TikTok of a small college football team, and in his celebration dance for his touchdown, he'd stood on his head. And the NFL had gotten wind of this TikTok, and the NFL players were doing that in their celebration. They were standing on their heads. And the guy said, he just kept saying, if not for the internet, how would anyone know about this small college? How would anyone know that this boy did this in the celebration? People would just have to kind of tell you about it. It wouldn't have had the effect that it's had if not for the internet. And I immediately knew. I was like, that's it. I was on a leg extension, and I said, that's it. It's the name of my podcast is If Not for This Podcast. And in my head, it was so many things could be filled in. I would have been so alone today if not for this podcast. I wouldn't have laughed today if not for this podcast. I wouldn't have spoken to anyone today if not. And yes, you can speak to me on your phone. Just talk right at me. I'll hear you, I promise. If not for this podcast, I would never even know that someone else dealt with this mental struggle exactly the way that I do. These conversations that we're going to have are going to be so enlightening. And I fully believe that evil and dark and Satan has us absolutely alienated and isolated on the things that we share across the board. So where you're thinking that you're the only person that's struggling with this, you're not the only person. Chances are the majority of us know exactly what you're talking about.